File this one under whoops. Patty Jenkins is not signed on for Wonder Woman 2. What could that mean for the sequel? I'm DJ Wooldridge. Welcome to Screen Junkies News. Turns out that acclaimed Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins was only signed on for the one movie. Now, with the sequel all but certain, it's time for Warner Brothers to head to the negotiating table and see how much it's going to cost them to bring her back. Will it be for all of the money or just most of it? Here to discuss this with me are Roth Cornett and Dan Merle. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How would you feel if you directed one of the biggest hits of the summer and you got to go back and ask for more money to direct a sequel?
Pretty awesome.
I feel like it was time to go on a nice vacation.
Nice. Take a little break.
Yeah.
Take a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody, we all need a nap. So is this like a big mistake Warner Brothers made, or is it just par for the course? Because word on the street is that normally this is what Warner Brothers does. If you haven't directed a big budget movie before, they give you one and then they figure it out later.
Yeah, standard.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's smart. Honestly, I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. I think that if you have somebody it's a new franchise, and if you have somebody who's working on a scale that is new, you have to see if this is going to work. Like, you don't want to sign somebody, let's say, for example, that, not to call anyone out, but just the reality of it, let's say Fox had signed Josh Trank to direct 3 Fantastic Four movies.
Whoops. That would be a
Then
whoops.
you would be in a case where the first one doesn't work. Well, now you're obligated to either pay him to direct nothing, or to keep him on. So I think it's smart if you have a director that you're trying out in a franchise that you're trying out to say, let's try the first one. And you know what? If the movie does well, we're going to have the money to bring you back.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing, though, is that typically speaking, though, you could and would form a contract where you were in the position to either renew or not.
Yeah.
So that you didn't necessarily have to pay Patty anything and you didn't have to use her, but you could option that if you wanted to. That's even like in much smaller scale productions, how the people doing the production aim the contracts. Like, you have the right to option, but maybe her agents would then come back and negotiate around that a little differently. So it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But certainly Gal, right, is optioned,
right,
and should be. And Marvel is like, you're on with us for 27 films.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most is 9, but it's a tricky scenario because they cannot do this without Gal now, right?
No, there's no option yet.
Yeah.
Technically, we don't want her to, but they could do it without Patty. So really, what kind of well, we'll get into that.
They could attempt it.
They shouldn't,
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Roth and I were talking a little bit about directors that had used this to kind of leverage a better position after that first movie. I know Joss Whedon's on record as saying that he made more money doing Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog than he did Avengers 1, and that he said that he really knew what it felt like to get paid with Avengers 2. And I guess Christopher Nolan...
So Christopher Nolan, here was a couple of interesting things as our intrepid researchers, such as DJ, we're looking into this a little bit. We wanted to look at things like, well, what did the Russo brothers get for Winter Soldier versus Civil War and things like that? And Nolan, what was sort of the rate of increase for them, for the directors? And those numbers, oddly enough, as much as the talents numbers are pretty out there, are not readily available. What we do know is that Christopher Nolan on Dunkirk is getting $20 million plus 20% of the box office, which is a large amount of money. That is reported by the Hollywood Reporter, which is the largest fee for a director since Peter Jackson in 2005 for the King Kong movie.
And nothing went wrong with that.
Well, but here's the thing, is that for, like you're saying, pointing out that Joss, like if he got paid more for Dr. Horrible, and we know that Marvel is pretty, especially at that point, was pretty harsh negotiators around salary. This could be a long-term game in terms of how much can I ultimately get in the long run by building my name out as a director that commands that kind of a salary.
Yeah, but I feel like Joss Whedon, that felt like a paycheck movie. I think by the end of that, he was glad he got paid a lot of movie because I don't know how much of his heart. And
You're talking about
not me speculating. Ultron. He's admitted like I felt like there was a gun to my head to do certain things in order for me to make the movie that I wanted to make. So it's also kind of that be careful what you wish for, because I think on Ultron, particularly with Joss Whedon, and again, you know, I say that like, oh, I want Patty Jenkins back for Wonder Woman 2. I mean, Jon Favreau came back for Iron Man 2, and that wasn't the best movie. But I think both of those movies were more the victim of a studio who said, oh, wow, we have to do all of this jamming in and world building and connectivity as opposed to make an actual sequel to the movie that came before it.
Well, that brings us to something we were talking about. And I thought if you're a director, sure, you want to, everybody wants money because we love that money. But if you're a director, one of the main things that I would want to negotiate around is creative freedom.
Power.
Power.
I would, that's for me too. You know, if you have that, particularly if I were Patty Jenkins, and if I got the chance to go back to that table, is I think that she was able to wield, I mean, she said Warner Brothers wanted to cut the No Man's Land scene.
She fought for it.
And I fought for it and got it. And I think now that she has shown that her decisions are the right ones, which I think everybody probably, except for some of the executives at Warner Brothers, already knew. I would say, like, yes, go and get a raise 100%. But I think what she really has now is the authority and the power to say, okay, now you know that I understand this character and that I can deliver a movie. I want final cut. I want input on the story so that you can maybe head off some of these problems and have it written into your contract that you can say, no, I don't want to put the Flash in my Wonder Woman sequel. I want to continue the stories with this character.
And create a clear story. Yeah, I mean, that's in Nolan, looking at Warner Brothers again, Nolan certainly had has their trust and their cash.
Yes, so much so. So you guys think she'll, instead of maybe emphasizing making more money, although that will probably be part of it, you think she would probably argue more for more creative control, or maybe even a more expansive, like, hey, let me do Wonder Woman 2, and then also these other 4 movies that I've been waiting to make forever.
I mean, she just doesn't strike me as a paycheck director.
Yeah, me neither.
She strikes me as a director that is going to tell stories that she's passionate about. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear that, yes, she's getting a raise, but, you know, what she really cares about is telling a good story.
Yeah, and if you look at it, I hate to keep harkening back to the same example, but if you look at a director who then goes, okay, great, then I'm going to make this really high budget movie about the subconscious. You know, that's my next thing for you, and gets the cash to do it. And now I'm going to make a war movie. You know, and those are sort of the freedoms that I think any artist would really be after, and she is an artist. So I think that's the cachet that she now has. Final cut, I'm curious, and we can look into this. How many directors actually truly have final cut? The one that springs to mind that I know is Michael Bay actually has the final cut, total final cut, runtime,
That's because Michael Bay has the studio rigged to explosives, and if anyone crosses him, he'll just blow up the entire studio. That's when you know the best destruction guys in town, the best demo guys. That's what happens. You're right. Final cut may be a bit of a pipe dream. I think that's probably an overstatement, but in the sense of, you know, you're not going to railroad me as far as we're going to jam in all of this extra stuff into this. Like, I have the contractual ability to say no. You know, or you're in breach and I can walk. You know. So,
do you guys think that these negotiations, and Patty Jenkins has said that she wants to try and squeeze in a limited series based on a story her husband wrote? Do you think this will delay us getting Wonder Woman 2?
No.
You never know.
I mean, it'd be interesting. I think probably, well, actually, this circles back to the original point. She does want to do this limited series based on something that her husband wrote. A limited series inherently allows the creator to do multiple things. Like Noah Hawley does both Fargo and Legion now for FX.
Solid.
Both really solid shows that you should check out. But he's able to do both because there's shorter seasons for each. So it does open those doors for both actors and directors, but director obviously has a longer haul. Let's look at the slate. Go to the slate.
Go to the DC slate.
So where would Wonder Woman 2, we've talked about this a little bit already, slip in here potentially?
Everything after Aquaman, honestly, I think you should put a asterisk and a maybe next to.
The Flash before Aquaman, we should put an asterisk for.
That's still scheduled to come out next year.
Which seems...
It has no director. It hasn't started shooting. So I think, but you know, maybe not date-wise, but I think it's safe to say that Aquaman we know is definitely happening. I think it's safe to say The Flash is definitely going to happen.
Yes.
Other than that, I would put asterisk TBD. Because I think that Wonder Woman 2 can and perhaps should. And Green Lantern Corps, maybe you can keep that other. But Shazam and Cyborg are the two that question mark. Shazam, I don't know what's going on with that. And Cyborg, we'll see how people react to him.
Do you think we'll get the Black Adam movie before we get Shazam?
It depends on. I do think that, and this will bring us into sort of a larger discussion about it, but to our earlier points, like, could it delay Wonder? If Patty Jenkins, if they believe in her enough to give her the freedom, and she says we need more time to make sure the script is right, that could delay it.
So it'll probably be, the studio will probably want to say, hey, 2 years, let's have this out in 2019. And she'll be like, hey, what about 2020?
Right. Maybe. I mean, and I'm curious about that, because that, to me, again, if she's thinking from a creative perspective, could be the thing. Even the Twilight film, the first director of the Twilight film, she said we need more time to go into the second one.
They cranked those out once a year, didn't they?
Right, and they said, sorry, dude.
Well, see, that's what I hate about...
Now, I'm not comparing the two, by the way. I'm just saying that was a case.
Wonder Woman is at least as good as Twilight.
Way better than Twilight.
Okay, let's not get into Twilight at all. But my point was, they then got a new director because she said no.
I just hate this idea of, and I think that studios should move away from this idea of a movie opens and its sequel is already on the calendar. Because if you look at things like Alien, opened in 1979, Aliens comes out in 1986, 7 years. I mean, that is an eternity in movie time. However, it turned out to be a really good movie. You know, Terminator came out in '84, Terminator 2 came out in '92. That's an 8-year gap. And this idea of, now, obviously you're not going to have an 8-year gap between Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 2. But I like this idea, and I wish a lot of studios would go back to this method of, we're going to put all of our resources into a movie. And if that movie is a hit, then we will develop a sequel, and we'll see when that's ready. We'll have an eye on 2020, but if it's not, we're not going to sell to all of our exhibitors and marketers and overseas distributors that hell or high water there's going to be a Wonder Woman sequel in the theaters on June 4th, 2020. Like, it's
coming to you June 4th, 2020. You heard it right here. Recorded. Dan Merle says.
I think that you're just. I think that's how you get these kind of slapdash things, and no studio is immune from this. I think you get these slapdash things because they're like, all right, we're not going to sell you one movie, we're selling you 6 movies, and then you get the dark universe.
Well, and the worst part about that is that the hard part about that is those movies make money because it's characters people know, and the quality, we all complain about the quality, but people still go and buy their ticket. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Diminishing returns from $1 billion is still $700 million.
Yeah. And so, like, they're fine with it.
I think you make a really good point. And I also think probably, unfortunately, things are being decided in a slightly different matrix around which character is going to make us the most money and things like that. And I feel like with things like Cyborg, for example, a lot of that's going to depend on how the audience reacts to these characters. I mean, Wonder Woman was already slated, but the audience also reacted very positively coming out of Batman v Superman.
Speaking of how these characters are received in these movies, I know Forbes ran an article recently talking about how Warner Brothers is waiting to see how Justice League plays out before all those movies with asterisks by them, before they decide what they're going to do with them. How do we think, I mean, for one, how do you guys think Wonder Woman has affected what we're going to think about Justice League? And how do you think both those movies will maybe change what DC does with its films?
I think it's a smart move, number one. I mean, that's how the movie business used to work. You made things based on audience reaction to the things that you already made. So that's a smart move. I think that, I mean, Justice League is kind of its own beast at this point. I think it's there's just so many moving pieces to it. You do have Wonder Woman. You've got Ben Affleck. You have Aquaman and the Flash getting introduced, and I think that movie itself is kind of on an island on its own. I think what you are going to find out is, are people connecting to these individual characters? And, for example, the Cyborg movie. Do people like that character? Should we move forward with that? But I think it's smart overall to just, I think you can make tentative plans, but to say, hey, are people liking what we're doing before you just plow forward?
Yeah, I think too, because this story is so contained, right? I'd be curious if we really are allowed, to have stories, character-based stories that are not necessarily feel forced to, as you're talking about, Dan, tie to every other character in every single movie, which can, I think, get a little cumbersome for the filmmakers and for everyone involved. And so, like with Justice League, though, financially, the money's always going to drive everything. And so Wonder Woman's done very well so far. I hope it continues to do well, and I think it will. But if Justice League comes in and makes double what Wonder Woman did overall, and test audiences are connecting to character X, Y, and Z, then I think that they are going to move forward in that way. I mean, what are we doing with, by the way, Superman going forward? You know, is a big question that we have.
And I think that you are seeing a little bit of studio reaction to this fatigue of interconnected things. I think Justice League and Infinity War were both originally labeled as, we're going to make Justice League Part 1 and Infinity War Part 1, Justice League Part 2 and Infinity War Part 2. And I think both sides said, wait a minute, who knows if this is going to affect the movie overall, but I think they're at least recognizing that people are maybe sick of saying, why am I paying to see part of a movie? And then I have to go pay to see the other part. Even if I didn't like the first part, I still want to see the end. So I'm hoping that is a small sign of these studios saying, like, maybe let's tone it down a bit. We can still make great superhero movies and not have them all be this log of, you know, just like interconnected pieces that they're unintelligible without the other.
One of the things people seem to be responding to in Wonder Woman is the fact that there's a little wink to the overall connected universe, but beyond that, it's its own entity. And so hopefully we will get more of that stands on its own. Now,
DJ, what is happening with Superman, though?
What is happening with Superman is that they will bring him back from the dead, and they will probably make a Man of Steel 2 in one of those slots where there's an asterisk. Because the Man of Steel 2, before Wonder Woman, was the best received out of the movies they've done. So, God forbid, Patty Jenkins is like, no, I don't want to do Wonder Woman 2, no thanks. Who could fill her boots?
We burn everything, right, Dan?
I honestly, I think if you're Warner Brothers, you just do whatever you have to do to get Patty Jenkins back. Honestly, I think that part 2s are, in many ways, even harder than part 1s. And I think that you don't want to change gears. I mean, it's been done, but there's a lot of evidence, you know, both ways. But I honestly think Patty Jenkins has such a strong take on the character. Before you even talk about replacement, I think you do whatever it takes to get. And I don't think she's going to be resistant to that. I think the studio just has to be flexible enough to say, like, okay, maybe we will start 6 months later than we want to, if that means that we get you. I hate this inflexibility of, like, I'm sorry, we have a date, we're going with you whether you want to go or not.
Before we even have a script, we know when it's coming out.
What would you like to see?
I'd like to see. The only one I could think of is possibly Catherine Bigelow.
She won't do it.
She's very talented, though.
She won't do. I mean, because I think Catherine Bigelow is probably. Look, if I had to wager a guess, every time they've been looking for a director for something, they've gone to her. And every time I think she said, I'm doing a different thing, and that's thank you. But no, maybe eventually she'll change her mind.
Do you have somebody? Do you have a?
I'm with Dan. I'm like, we sort of burn everything if it's not. But I just am going to take this opportunity to say, why has no one, and I'm not saying for this movie at all, but why has no one tapped Gareth Evans of The Raid for a larger action or superhero movie? Why is that not a thing?
I have a theory that they think they have.
Oh, but it's actually Gareth Edwards the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what? No, he directed Godzilla, right? Like, no, that was Gareth Edwards. No one has hired him. Like, I thought he'd done like 8 movies. That's my theory. That's the only explanation I can think of.
I don't get it. It's one of those things that I want this injustice solved.
So Gareth Evans to direct Wonder Woman 2.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
And then you have Patty Jenkins do Justice League 2.
So Joss is obviously finalizing Justice League, and then he's doing Batgirl, but like that's the only other person that's currently that I could think of, really. But
especially since he took a pass at it back in the
day,
pre-Marvel days.
So, but Patty,
we all want Patty, but we want to know from you guys, now that Wonder Woman's out and we all love it, what DC movie are you most excited to see on that list that we showed? Is it Aquaman? Is it Justice League? Is it one of the asterisks, Shazam or The Flash? Let us know in the comments down below. Please click here for more internet things. Tweet us at SJ News and make sure to subscribe to SJ News. Thanks, Dan and Roth, for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah.